As a physician, you play a leadership role in guiding your patients toward healthy lifestyles and behaviors. Your patients look to you not only for medical diagnosis and treatment, but also as a general authority on a wide range of topics. These include general wellness issues and recommendations for managing specific health challenges. One of the simplest ways your patients can make daily decisions that have lasting impact is regarding their nutritional choices. Hello, I'm Dr. Michael Rakotz, and I'm here to talk about the Nutrition Facts Label, a tool that can help your patients make healthful dietary choices that can have long-term effects on their health and wellness. As trained physicians, we know that healthy choices can help prevent some chronic illnesses, or help your patients manage symptoms if they're living with certain diseases. But you may also desire information about how to approach this topic with your patients to help guide them in making these healthful choices in a simple and efficient manner. This video will provide the basic information to help guide your patients toward making healthy choices. It also offers companion educational materials that you or your office staff can provide to patients. The information in this video is being made available to you through a collaboration between the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the American Medical Association. So let's get started. Perhaps a patient has asked you specific questions about nutrition. Or perhaps you feel that discussing your patient's dietary choices could have a positive impact on his or her overall health and wellness. Either way, talking about the Nutrition Facts Label is a great place to start. This simple tool enables you to easily break down these topics for your patients. It gives them a hands-on reference that they can use in real time, whether they're standing in the supermarket aisle or staring at their pantry shelves to decide what's for dinner. You can also encourage them to use the Nutrition Facts Label to help monitor specific health goals, like reducing the risk of or helping to manage certain diseases. Using the Nutrition Facts Label can aid in monitoring specific nutrients that are known to affect cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity, certain cancers, and osteoporosis. That's what makes the Nutrition Facts Label so handy. Although it's simple, a basic explanation of the label may be needed for your patients who have never used it. The following scenario introduces the Nutrition Facts Label as a prelude to discussing specific nutrients.
During your exam today, you mentioned that you sometimes feel as if you aren't eating as well as you could be.
Yes, doctor. It's hard sometimes figuring out the best choices when there are so many options. I don't have time to do any research about which foods are better for me.
Are you familiar with the Nutrition Facts Label?
Yeah, I know it's on food packages, but I don't really use it.
Well, if you're interested in making more healthful food choices, the Nutrition Facts Label is a great place to start. The Nutrition Facts Label is regulated by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and is required on food and beverage packages.
I didn't know that. I thought food companies decided what to include on the label.
No, the Nutrition Facts Label, its format, and the specific nutritional information it contains are all required by law. Food companies must provide it on their food and beverage products. And since this information is right on the package, it's very easy to access. It's a great tool you can use whenever you're choosing foods. Also, since the Nutrition Facts Label has a standard format, you can easily compare products and see their similarities and differences. Remember, the first step is to look for the label. Then, you can use it to plan a more healthful diet and make choices that can affect your long-term health.
Introducing the Nutrition Facts Label to a patient as a general dietary management tool is a great first step. But there are specific aspects of the label that are especially important for patients to understand. Serving size and servings per container should be among the first items your patients look for on the Nutrition Facts Label. All of the nutrient information on the Nutrition Facts Label is based on one serving of the food. Let's take a closer look at the serving information.
Before, you were talking about using the label to compare foods. Can you tell me a little more about how to do this?
Good question. First, check out the serving size and servings per container at the top of the nutrition facts label. Serving size is not an actual recommendation. Rather, it's based on the amount of food that is customarily eaten at one time. It's shown as a common household measure that is appropriate to the food, such as cup, tablespoon, piece, slice, or jar, followed by the metric amount in grams. The serving size can really vary from one food to another. For example, a serving from one package of cookies might be 5 cookies, but a serving from another package might be only 1 cookie. That's why you always need to check the nutrition facts label. The other key information at the top of the label is servings per container. This shows the total number of servings in the entire package. This is important because all of the information listed on the nutrition facts label is based on 1 serving, even if the package contains more than 1 serving. So, knowing the number of servings per container lets you figure out the total number of calories and nutrients you would be eating or drinking if you consumed the entire package.
I noticed the other day that the chips I bought had 3 servings. I was really surprised by this because the bag was pretty small.
Good observation. In fact, it's not uncommon for a food package to contain more than 1 serving. And if a package contains 2 servings and you eat the entire package, then you've consumed twice the amount of calories and nutrients like sodium and dietary fiber listed on the package. So, for that small bag of chips you mentioned, if you ate the entire package, you got triple the calories and triple the nutrients like sodium.
Yeah, I figured as much. Next time I'll check out the number of servings before I finish the bag.
Good idea. The nutrition facts label is really helpful. I just had a bottle of iced tea that was 2 servings. Again, checking the serving size and servings per container is the key to seeing how many calories and nutrients you're actually consuming. Sometimes foods that seem to be the same can be very different when you look at the nutrition facts label.
As you talk with patients about the nutrition facts label, your conversations will naturally turn to calories. This is one of the key components of the label. It also ties into other health-related conversations you may be having with patients about health issues like cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. Your goal is to help them work toward a more healthful diet. As with all information listed on the label, calories are based on 1 serving of the food or beverage.
During your exam, we talked about one of your wellness goals, which is to maintain a healthy weight. It's a pretty simple equation, actually. Overall, if you eat or drink more calories than you burn through daily activities and your body's metabolism, you gain weight. Similarly, eating and drinking fewer calories than you burn will lead to weight loss. When it comes to managing weight, whether you're trying to lose, gain, or maintain, all calories count, regardless of their source. The key to weight management is to balance the number of calories you consume with the number of calories your body uses. You can monitor your diet by keeping track of calories consumed throughout the day.
And the label can help me with that?
Yes, and remember, as with other label information, calories refers to the total number of calories in 1 serving of the food. So, if you eat or drink multiple servings of a food or beverage, you're multiplying the number of calories as well. In addition to the nutrition facts label, you're probably now seeing calorie information on restaurant menus and menu boards and on vending machines. This can also help you monitor your calories when eating away from home. Okay, back to calories. Calories supply energy or fuel for the body. The nutrients that supply calories are fat, carbohydrate, including sugars, and protein. Alcohol is not a nutrient, but it also provides calories. Carbohydrates and protein each supply 4 calories per gram, whereas fat, provides 9 calories per gram. That means fat has more than twice the calories per gram than carbohydrate or protein. In addition, alcohol provides 7 calories per gram.
Is there a way to tell how many is too many calories?
When you're looking at calories, a general rule of thumb is that 100 calories per serving is moderate and 400 calories per serving is high. It's also important to note that some of the information on the nutrition facts label is based on a 2,000 calorie daily diet. 2,000 calories is often used as the basis for general nutrition advice, but individual calorie needs vary and depend on your age, gender, and physical activity level. The website choosemyplate.gov can help you determine your personal calorie needs.
Thanks. I'll check that out. Comparing calories sounds like a pretty easy way for me to choose foods to help me manage my weight. And since I'm interested in losing some weight, should I be looking for fat-free foods?
Good question. But actually, fat-free doesn't mean calorie-free. Some lower fat food items may have as many calories as the full-fat versions. For example, if the fat calories have been replaced by calories from sugars, always check the nutrition facts label and compare the calories and nutrients in the fat-free version to the regular version.
Reviewing all this with you makes the label sound pretty easy to understand.
It is. So now, let's talk about what else you can do to maintain a healthy weight, okay?
Great.
Having an understanding of servings and calories is invaluable for your patients and their general health and nutritional goals. But in addition to these basics, it's important for your patients to understand percent daily value. Percent daily value indicates how much of each nutrient is in one serving of the food in relation to a patient's overall daily dietary needs. Certain nutrients are known to increase the risk of some diseases, like cardiovascular disease. Understanding percent daily value is the key to monitoring specific nutrients that a patient may wish to get more of or less of. However, percent daily value can be a bit tricky to explain, especially since not all nutrients listed on the label have a percent daily value. Let's listen in.
As we've been talking more about nutrition, you asked about percent daily value. The percent daily values are based on the daily values. The daily values are the amounts of key nutrients recommended per day for all Americans 4 years of age and older. Some of the daily values are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. The exceptions are cholesterol and sodium, where the daily value stays the same regardless of your caloric intake. Although a 2,000 calorie diet is often used as the basis for general nutrition advice, your calorie needs may be different.
The one thing I still really don't get is the way the numbers in the column add up.
I know, it seems off, but keep in mind that the percent daily value column doesn't add up vertically to 100%. Instead, the percent daily value represents the percentage of the daily value for each nutrient in a serving of food.
Okay, I think I get it. You told me about the general rule of thumb for moderate versus high calories. How about percent daily value? Is there a guideline I can use?
Yes, here's an easy guideline. If a nutrient has 5% of the daily value or less per serving, it is low in that nutrient. Now, this can be good or bad, depending on if it's a nutrient you want to get more of, like dietary fiber, or less of, like sodium. If a food has 20% of the daily value or more per serving, it is high in that nutrient. This can also be good or bad, depending on if it's a nutrient you want to get more of, like calcium, or less of, like saturated fat. Although individual calorie needs may vary, you can still use the percent daily value to compare food products and to choose products that are higher in nutrients you want to get more of, like dietary fiber and calcium, and lower in nutrients you want to get less of, like saturated fat and sodium.
Oh, that makes sense. I never quite got the percent daily value before, but from what I can tell, it gives me the scoop on individual nutrients that I'm interested in tracking.
You've got it. Plus, you can also use the percent daily value to make dietary trade-offs with other foods, using it to balance things out throughout the day. Let's say you had a favorite food at lunch that was high in sodium. For example, it had a percent daily value of 20%, which is on the high end of the 5 to 20% scale. Sodium is one of those nutrients that we encourage people to get less of because it can increase your risk of developing high blood pressure. So you might want to choose foods for dinner that are lower in sodium. For example, you could aim for foods with a percent daily value of 5%, which is low.
We've talked about percent daily value and touched on the fact that it can be used to determine nutrients to get more of and nutrients to get less of. You may be interested to learn that certain nutrients are required to be listed on the nutrition facts label, while others are optional for food manufacturers to include. The nutrition facts label must list total fat, saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, sodium, total carbohydrate, dietary fiber, sugar, protein, vitamin A, vitamin C, calcium, and iron. Manufacturers may also voluntarily list other nutrients on the label, like monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat, soluble and insoluble fiber, and specific vitamins and minerals. However, manufacturers are required to list these voluntary nutrients if a statement is made on the package labeling about the health effects or the amount of the nutrient contained in the food. Vitamins and minerals are also required to be listed if they're added to the food. Overall, the nutrition facts label can help your patients monitor those nutrients that can help reduce the risk of developing some chronic diseases. Or it can help manage those diseases if they do have them. Here's a quick example. As you know, cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death for both men and women in the United States today. The nutrition facts label can help your patients compare foods and decide which ones fit with a diet that may help reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. They can do this not only by choosing foods that have fewer calories per serving, but also by choosing foods with a lower percent daily value of saturated fat, trans fat, and sodium. After you've introduced percent daily value to your patients, you have an ideal segue for talking about specific nutrients that they may wish to get more of or less of, depending on their specific health issues or concerns. Let's join a conversation in progress.
Doctor, before you were talking about how percent daily value can help me track specific nutrients as I compare and choose foods. I'm guessing that there are some nutrients that are better for me to get than others?
Actually, yes. According to the dietary guidelines for Americans, there are certain nutrients that Americans often don't get enough of in their diets. Some of them are required to be listed on the nutrition facts label, and others may be listed if a food contains them. Your goal for these nutrients is to get 100% of the daily value on most days. The nutrients that you should get more of are dietary fiber, calcium, iron, potassium, and vitamin D.
So these are the good nutrients. What about the bad ones?
I wouldn't call the other nutrients bad necessarily. They are just nutrients that you should limit. They should be eaten in moderate amounts because they can increase the risk of certain diseases. These are what we refer to as nutrients to get less of. So the goal is to stay below 100% of the daily value for these nutrients each day. They include saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and sugars. Trans fat and sugars have no percent daily value, so you can use grams to compare. Let's take a closer look at the nutrients to get more of. The first of these is dietary fiber. Dietary fiber is a nutrient to get more of for most Americans. Dietary fiber is required to be on the nutrition facts label. The daily value for dietary fiber is 25 grams based on a 2,000 calorie diet, so you should aim to get this amount on most days. Dietary fiber is a type of carbohydrate found in plant foods that cannot be readily digested in the small intestine.
Last time I was here, you mentioned that getting more fiber would help my digestive system stay in better working order.
Yes, you're right about that. There are two types of dietary fiber: insoluble and soluble. Most plant foods contain some of each kind. Insoluble fiber provides bulk for stool formation and speeds up the movement of food and waste through the digestive system. This promotes intestinal regularity and helps prevent constipation. Typically, you won't see insoluble or soluble fiber listed under dietary fiber on the nutrition facts label. Food manufacturers aren't required to list the amount of soluble or insoluble fiber on the label unless the package contains a statement about their health effects or about the amount of fiber, like high or low, that is contained in the food.
I've also heard that fiber reduces heart disease. Is that true?
Yes, fiber offers many benefits. Soluble fiber interferes with the absorption of dietary fat and cholesterol. This can help lower low-density lipoprotein cholesterol levels in the blood. Low-density lipoprotein, or LDL cholesterol, is often referred to as bad cholesterol. Lowering your LDL cholesterol reduces the risk of heart disease, and because soluble fiber slows digestion and the rate at which carbohydrates and other nutrients are absorbed into the bloodstream, it also helps control the level of blood glucose, or blood sugar, by preventing rapid rises in blood sugar following a meal. What's more, both types of dietary fiber make you feel full. This may help reduce the amount of food you eat and help you manage your weight. And fiber-rich foods are generally more nutrient-dense, which means they provide vitamins, minerals, and other substances that may have positive health effects, while containing relatively few calories.
Wow, fiber sounds pretty important. I know we talked about whole grain cereal at my last appointment. What are some other good sources of fiber?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that plant foods contain different amounts of soluble and insoluble fiber, and you should try to get a mix of both. Soluble fiber can be found in foods such as beans, peas, fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and oats like oatmeal and oat bran. Insoluble fiber is also found in foods such as fruits, vegetables, nuts, and seeds, as well as wheat bran and whole grain foods such as bread, cereals, pasta, and brown rice. Whole grains are important for a healthful diet. You should aim to make whole grains at least half of your daily grain choices. Another helpful tool to see if a food contains whole grains is the ingredient list. Ingredients are listed in descending order by weight, so the ingredient with the greatest contribution to the product weight is listed first. There are many whole grain ingredients such as brown rice, oatmeal, and whole wheat. Remember, check the ingredient list to see if the food contains any of these valuable ingredients.
That's really helpful. I know I've seen some of these ingredients listed on food I've bought in the past. I need to write this whole list down.
I know, there's a lot to remember when it comes to dietary fiber and how to get more of it into your diet. This information will be helpful.
Thanks, Doctor. Sounds like it shouldn't be that hard to get 100% of the daily value of fiber every day if I keep my eye out for some of these whole grain options.
Fiber is one of the nutrients of concern identified in the dietary guidelines for Americans. Another nutrient to encourage your patients to get more of is iron. Iron deficiency is the leading cause of anemia in the United States. Iron is particularly important for all of your female patients who are pregnant or who are capable of becoming pregnant. It's important to note that vitamin C-rich foods such as broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cantaloupe, citrus fruits, kiwi fruit, peppers, strawberries, and tomatoes can also help with iron absorption. In addition to dietary fiber and iron, many Americans don't get enough calcium. Lack of calcium can lead to low bone mass, which is a risk factor for osteoporosis and can put your patients at risk for bone fractures. Adequate vitamin D from foods such as eggs, fatty fish like salmon and tuna, fortified cereal, orange juice, milk, and milk products can also help reduce the risk of bone fractures. Generally speaking, if a patient is eating a varied diet that includes lean meats and poultry, seafood, eggs, fat-free or 1% low-fat milk and milk products, fruits, vegetables, beans, peas, soy products, unsalted nuts and seeds, and whole grains, he or she is getting a nutrient-rich diet. But sometimes your patient needs to hear more about those nutrients they should get less of. Nutrients to get less of include saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and sugars. These are nutrients that can put a patient at risk for illnesses such as cardiovascular disease and obesity. The educational materials provided with this video include information on all of these. However, we'll focus in on 3 of these where your patient's use of the nutrition facts label can have the greatest impact. They are the 3 S's: saturated fat, sodium, and sugars.
So, we've already talked about the nutrients to get more of. Now let's look at the nutrients you should try to get less of. For these, aim to stay below 100% of the daily value each day. The first of these is saturated fat. Saturated fat is required to be on the nutrition facts label. The daily value for saturated fat is less than 20 grams per day, based on a 2,000 calorie diet, so you should aim to get less than this amount each day. Saturated fat is found in higher proportions in animal products, and unlike unsaturated fat, it is typically solid at room temperature. The human body actually makes all the saturated fat it needs, so it's not necessary to get any saturated fat from the food you eat. Eating too much saturated fat can raise your levels of total cholesterol and low-density lipoprotein, also known as LDL, or the bad cholesterol in the blood. This, in turn, can increase your risk of developing heart disease. Heart disease is the leading cause of death in both men and women in the United States. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommends that you consume less than 10% of your calories from saturated fat, and that you replace saturated fat with monounsaturated fat and/or polyunsaturated fat. If you do that, you can decrease your risk of developing heart disease.
Wow, that's worth it. I think it's easy to remember which is which, since unsaturated fats are usually liquid at room temperature. I'm finding myself using olive oil and canola oil more often anyway.
Well, I'm pleased to hear that you're making positive choices for cutting back on saturated fat. You can also check the ingredient list for ingredients that contain saturated fat. Some examples are lard, shortening, butter, and cream.
Next up is another nutrient to get less of that can have a negative impact on your patient's health: sodium. Most Americans eat too much sodium. But what many people don't realize is that the use of the salt shaker is not the main cause of too much sodium in the diet. In fact, more than 75% of dietary sodium comes from eating packaged and restaurant foods. Let's sit in on a conversation about sodium.
I've been thinking I may eat too much salt. That's the same thing as sodium, right?
Well, the words salt and sodium don't mean the same thing, but they are often used interchangeably. Salt's chemical name is sodium chloride, and it's a crystal-like compound that is abundant in nature and is used to flavor and preserve food. Sodium is one of the chemical elements found in salt. Sodium is a nutrient to get less of for most Americans. Sodium is required to be on the nutrition facts label, and the daily value for sodium is less than 2,400 milligrams per day. To put this amount in perspective, that's equal to about 1 teaspoon of salt. But on average, Americans eat about 3,300 milligrams of sodium a day.
Wow, that's a big difference.
Yes, and most people don't realize that more than 40% of sodium consumed by Americans comes not from the salt shaker, but from 10 types of foods. These include breads, deli foods, pizza, soup, sandwiches, cheese, mixed pasta and meat dishes, and snacks.
Bummer, because all of those are pretty yummy. But honestly, sometimes I do worry about my blood pressure. It seems to be getting a little higher each year. And I remember you telling me that salt, or I guess I should say sodium, has something to do with that, right?
Yes, and believe me, you're not alone. High blood pressure, also known as hypertension, affects approximately 1 in 3 U.S. adults, or 75 million people. An additional 78 million adults suffer from slightly elevated blood pressure, which can turn into high blood pressure. A high blood pressure forces the heart to work harder and can damage blood vessels and organs. This can increase your risk of developing heart disease, congestive heart failure, stroke, and kidney disease. In the United States, heart disease is the leading cause of death, and stroke is among the top 5 leading causes of death for both men and women.
That's pretty scary, especially with my blood pressure going up each year.
Well, don't forget that it's normal for blood pressure to rise as you age. But the good news is that eating less sodium can often help lower blood pressure to within the normal range. That, in turn, can help reduce the risk of developing these serious medical conditions. Again, the nutrition facts label makes it easy to track. Also, eating foods high in potassium can lower blood pressure by reducing the adverse effects of sodium on blood pressure. The information I'm giving you discusses sodium in your diet as well.
Clearly, sodium consumption is an important topic. It's eye-opening for many when they hear that the daily recommended intake for sodium for the general population should be less than 1 teaspoon of salt. Now let's move on to sugars, the last of the nutrients to get less of. As you're probably aware, many foods with high levels of added sugar, such as packaged foods and beverages, contribute a substantial portion, more than 13% of the calories consumed by Americans. And they often provide few or no important nutrients and little or no dietary fiber. Sugars are a nutrient to get less of for most Americans and are required to be on the nutrition facts label. The label tells you the amount in grams of sugars in each serving. In addition, sugars have no percent daily value, so patients can use the amount of grams as a guide to compare sugars in foods. Let's observe a general discussion about sugars.
We all love sweets, but sugar is a nutrient to get less of. Sugars are a major source of calories in the diet. But unlike the other nutrients to get less of, sugars have no percent daily value on the nutrition facts label. So, you need to use the amount of grams as a guide to compare sugars in different foods and beverages.
Well, that doesn't sound too hard. I've heard that sugars can cause cavities, but aren't there benefits to some foods with sugars, like cereal?
Actually, foods and beverages that contain added sugars contribute calories, but generally have few or no important nutrients and little or no dietary fiber. So instead, focus on eating nutrient-rich foods that contain naturally occurring sugars, like fruits, because they typically include other important nutrients too, like dietary fiber and vitamins and minerals. In addition to fruit, naturally occurring sugars are found in foods like vegetables, whole grains, and fat-free and low-fat milk and milk products. And just as with tracking whole grains, you can use the ingredient list to help you recognize and avoid added sugars. Some examples of added sugars are high fructose corn syrup, honey, and maple syrup. The materials I gave you include helpful information on sugars in your diet.
As you have seen, there are many tips and strategies that you can share with your patients to help them use the nutrition facts label to make thoughtful dietary choices. You can use your patient conversations as teachable moments for both general and specific discussions. You can encourage your staff to offer this helpful information to patients too. There are certain overarching actions that you can recommend to your patients to promote a varied diet rich in beneficial nutrients. Encourage your patients to strive for a diet that emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and fat-free or low-fat milk, milk products, and includes lean meats and poultry, seafood, eggs, beans and peas, soy products, and unsalted nuts and seeds. Patients should also choose foods that are high in dietary fiber, calcium and iron, and low in saturated fat, trans fat, sodium, and sugars. And of course, regular physical activity is important for overall health and fitness. It also helps control body weight by balancing the calories from food with the calories expended each day. As a general tool, your patients can use the nutrition facts label to compare foods and make healthier choices. They can also use the label to monitor those nutrients that can help reduce the risk of developing or help manage certain chronic diseases, such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, obesity, certain cancers, and osteoporosis. In addition, you can adjust the conversation according to your patient's specific health needs or conditions. On behalf of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration and the American Medical Association, we thank you for educating your patients about this important tool and empowering them to make nutritional choices that can improve their long-term health.